Welcome to the Coalesce podcast. My name is Grant.
And I'm Meg.
And we have the one and only Andrew Scott here. And he's the primary developer on Coalesce. And so we have just actually released, he just shipped, and we put a little bow on Coalesce 5.0. We're pretty excited about that. I actually upgraded a couple projects that I've been working on early in the week to 5.0 and just really pretty seamless experience. But we wanted to have Andrew on just to kind of talk about some of the new things that are in here and just look through some of the different pieces that that might be of interest to folks. Some new things, maybe some changes, some things that have been deprecated. Because again, we're trying to really keep this framework fresh so that folks can really be doing the kind of the latest and greatest stuff, but still have support for all the things. We don't want to just totally let that go. But at a certain point, you have to let things like Knockout go. It's not that you can't use Knockout, but eventually you're going to be just on older versions of the framework. So, Andrew, thanks for joining us today. And any just general comments you have about like some of the what are your kind of couple favorite things about the new version of Coalesce?
Yeah, so one thing I'm trying to do here going forward is to be actually sticking to a kind of a proper release cadence and releasing actual versions that adhere to semantic versioning rather than just kind of have everybody consume the CI builds. So going forward, we're not going to be publishing any of those CI builds. It's really going to be kind of a deliberate publish step every time we push out a new version, major, minor patch versions. Also maintaining a changelog here going forward and actually backdated going back about a year and a half into the kind of 4.0 versions that kind of drug along for a little while, but we're back into kind of the normal way of doing things now. So those are probably some of the just those kind of housekeeping things are probably actually one of the more major impactful things of kind of the way that you're going to consume Coalesce in a project and the way that you're going to go to know what's been changing. Now you have a place to do that in the changelog there in the root of the Coalesce repository.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me let folks take kind of a look at what that is. So yeah, right here, there's this nice change log, all the things that are going on, the various changes here. So let's go ahead and go down through a few of these things. You just kind of want to talk down through a few of the issues. So if you want to find this, it's just here. You're back at the root of Coalesce, and there's just in all caps shouting at you right there is the change log, and here we go.
Yeah. So as Grant mentioned. And we took out all the support for Knockout.js. So if you're still on a project that's using Knockout.js, you can still totally do that. It's just probably time to move forward. But at this point, you're going to have to stay on the version 4 versions of Coalesce. Dropped all the old .NET targets that are no longer in long-term support right now. .NET 8 is the only LTS version of .NET. So upgrading your .NET version is pretty simple and easy to do. There's really no reason not to do it. So if you're still on anything prior to .NET 8, you just go ahead and upgrade because it's easy and there's really nothing you have to do. One of the more impactful changes here in kind of the section of breaking changes is this first one here. The instance methods on models used to automatically call db-context.save changes in the generated controllers, regardless of what you do in your custom method. So you may get to a point in that custom method where you say, oh, wait a minute, we need to bail out, not actually do the thing. Maybe you made some changes to instance fields on your model. Previously, that was really not possible. And you kind of had to resort to using a service method at that point if you wanted to avoid that save changes call. But now that's something you have to do yourself if you're intending to save changes out to your database, just so that's explicit. And not the framework doing kind of unexpected things.
Right, and just to kind of summarize, so if you do have a class and you expose a method on that is not static, that is an instance method, if you change the object that it's called on in the past, that object gets saved at the end, whether you want it saved or not. And basically what we said is, hey, call an explicit save at the end if you want that saved. And so if you have used kind of that feature, what we found is almost everybody was actually calling save if they wanted it saved, and it was double saving. I mean, the second one wouldn't actually save, but we just found that, hey, this is probably not the way that most people want us to work.
Yep. Moving down, kind of most of these are significantly less impactful and probably are not anything that you're really going to have to do anything about in your project unless you're maybe using some of the more advanced features in Coalesce. The second item about performing model state validation. So previously we only did that in certain situations. Really, this isn't kind of Coalesce the way that you would think of validation in the sense of Coalesce. Really, this is about cases where ASP.NET itself fails to bind your model. If, for example, you passed a string into a field that's supposed to be an int, if you're going through kind of the normal channels in Coalesce and using the generated code on the front end, that's already not possible. But if you're maybe going through the side and calling the APIs directly, maybe through an open API, kind of a generated client, passing the wrong kind of data or any other kind of binding failures, you can end up in cases where ASP.NET Core will fail to bind your model if it's too big and exceeds the form data limits in ASP.NET Core. Then now it'll return a proper error for that rather than just kind of a weird null reference exception when it tries to use your model that ended up binding as null because there were errors. So that just a nice little thing if may have ran into some weird bug where you're like, hey, my model is null, but why is my model null? How is that even possible? Well, that's probably what was happening, and we just weren't checking that proactively.
Right.
This next one, claims principal extension. So built into Coalesce, there were two extension methods on the claims principal class. There was a get, I think it was a get user ID and a get username method. Or no, it was a get user ID and get roles, I think. We removed those because the types of claims that are used in any specific project can vary significantly depending on the kind of authentication that you're using in that project. And so these extension methods were making assumptions about the exact claim name used for different claims on the user. And that would introduce significant confusion if you were in a project that wasn't using kind of the normal claim names for those. So we've moved those over to the Coalesce project template. And so then those can be more easily adapted to your specific project's needs, depending on your authentication schemes.
Right.
From here, so the fourth item and down are really just kind of some minor API breaking changes. The get item async and get list async on the data source return type change, you were probably not writing those methods specifically. And if you are, the change is pretty simple. There's just, instead of having a second item in a tuple that represents the include tree, that's just now attached to the item result, which was already a thing, already possible for at least a year now to attach the include tree to the item result. Is kind of the first step in removing these or changing the return types of these methods. So now these are just much cleaner APIs around those. After save was reworked to be always an async method, and we removed a bunch of the complication around the ref parameters in there. So if you need to do something on an after save, that's now significantly simpler.
Yeah, I saw that in my last project. I updated a couple things to use that instead.
And really kind of the rest of these we can probably just skip over. They're pretty
Right.
kind of the more minor breaking changes.
Mm-hmm.
On the front end side here, you will need to update the dependencies of so the versions of a number of your other dependencies. Just get on the latest view and view router, Viewify TypeScript, all your other dependencies. While you're upgrading Coalesce, just go ahead and bump all those to the latest as well. So the latest of those, or pretty close to the latest, are now required because we're using some of the newer features in those dependencies.
Yeah, and it's probably a good idea that if you do have a question, even if you're using this a while from when we're releasing this, which is September 20th, 2024, we're recording this. Another way to do that is to go and just build out a template project and see what the versions are in there, and that's going to give you a pretty good idea of what to use.
Yep, absolutely. The bind to query string function, we changed up the signature on that a little bit. It had like 5 or 6 parameters in it, so we simplified that down to put a lot of those extra kind of trailing parameters into an object so that it's easier to specify only the ones that you need. Otherwise, you had to, if you wanted to specify the 6th parameter, you'd have to pass in undefined for the first 4. Just to get over to that slot. So that's just easier to call. There's also an overload if you're binding directly to a ref. So you don't have to pass in the ref and then pass the literal string value as the second parameter, which was a little bit weird. So that works better now.
Great.
The API caller objects on the view model. So for example, the save method or any of the ones for your generated custom methods now return the what I call the real data directly rather than returning the raw response that contains all the HTTP headers and all that. We just found that you almost never care about those outer wrapping layers. And if you do care, those are now available on a property on those caller objects called raw response. So if you need those, if you need that, that's still there. And if you're going against the API client layer directly, it's also still there. This is just a change at the view model layer to make that a little easier, so you can just await that call and assign the result of that into a variable, and then you have your result rather than calling it and awaiting that call and then pulling the result out of the .result object on the caller object, which was just a bit circuitous.
Right, and this is on any kind of method like this where you're getting something back. And I found that this was really the only thing that I had to upgrade in my code. I was fairly current with my versions, but I did have to upgrade this. And it was really nice. I actually liked it because it just took out that extra stuff that really wasn't providing much value.
Yep. Yeah, so and you'll see types immediately after upgrading, you'll see TypeScript errors around this. It'll be pretty obvious where you need to update, just any place where you're taking that response and then accessing .result.object off of that. You can just take that .result.object part out of there. File downloads now default to inline instead of attachment. Basically, this is a header on the file download methods that tell the browser what to do with the file. ASP.NET Core basically defaults this to attachment all the time, and you actually kind of have to go out of your way to make it not attachment. The difference between these is the content disposition of attachment on a file download forces the browser to download it into, up into your downloads folder and the little thing up in the top right of your browser of your downloaded files. If it's inline, it allows the file to be displayed standalone in a tab. So if you have a file download that's an image, you can actually link to that image. And while you can already, display that image in an image tag, what you couldn't do is open that image in a new tab. So if you right-clicked on an image and say open this image in a new tab, it would actually just force download the file. And the same goes for other more advanced types of files. So a PDF, for example, you can grab the link to that file download input endpoint and actually open that up in a new tab. And it'll actually render the PDF in the browser using the browser's default PDF viewer.
Oh, that's great. Actually,
rather than forcing download.
Yeah, that's great. So, and you can force a download by using this force download, right? You can still put that on there if you want.
Yep, in the back end, if you want to force it to download, there's just a new parameter, a new property on the file object that you're returning from your custom method. So you can put it on there. You can also do it in the browser if you put an anchor tag as a link to that URL, and you just put the download HTML attribute on that anchor tag, then that's also going to force the browser to download it.
Great, awesome.
A number of deprecations. So, support for Vue 2 is deprecated, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Vue 2 went end of life 9 months ago, almost 10 months ago now. So, we're continuing to keep it in Coalesce and publish new versions. And if there are critical bug fixes that we need to do, we'll continue to support that at least for a little while longer. But we're not putting any more features into the Vue 2 side of things in Coalesce. So if you are still on Vue 2, it's really time to upgrade. it's probably time to upgrade about 2 years ago, but we
So
understand how those things happen.
yeah, absolutely. So with respect to the and then maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit, with respect to kind of the options API versus the composition API, and the templates and things like that, which direction are you seeing this thing go? And not that it really matters which one people use, but which one are we kind of using internally?
Yeah, I mean, so in the template, we use the composition API throughout. You know, every file in the template is using the composition API. The composition API is also the recommended path going forward by Vue officially. So you can still use the options API. It's still fully supported by Vue, and obviously you can use it in your application. In terms of what Coalesce supports, it's actually Coalesce isn't opinionated.
Mhm.
You know, that's the beauty of those two options within Vue is, you know, we don't care what you use. There's actually no difference to Coalesce, but would definitely recommend just staying on the well-worn path and the recommended path by Vue, which is the composition API.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot more of the examples and code samples and things like that coming out using the composition API, and even seeing it using TypeScript. I know for a while it was like everybody using JavaScript with the options API, but it feels like pretty much the community has gotten on board with using going the TypeScript route. So
Yeah, just good to keep in mind if you're going to do that V2 update, you might as well.
yep, move to TypeScript composition and stuff like that. So
yeah, and you know, Coalesce is already very, very opinionated and mandatory about the use of TypeScript.
yeah,
If you're using plain JavaScript in a Coalesce app, you're going to have a bad time because
yeah,
Coalesce generates TypeScript files.
yeah.
So most of these other deprecations you'll see warnings about in your code. Some of the various attributes that you were able to put on custom methods, we just moved those into the execute attribute for better discoverability of the different things you can do on a custom method rather than having that scattered throughout a whole bunch of different attributes. And then a few things just renamed, which again, you'll see warnings about in your code. These are things that are not gone. They're just, they have new names, but the old name is still there, at least for a little while.
Yeah, and I had to fix a few of these things on the execute attribute. Really easy. Now, instead of having two attributes, I have one with just name parameters. So the arguments are going in there, just having names on them. So I think it makes it really nice looking too. So great. Anything else that we want to cover here? This is a lot of just details at this point. What any other high points here, Andrew?
Sure. Yeah. So a few of the highlights. The code generator now warns it'll check your npm dependency versions and check that those are matching both the code generator and the NuGet package. Because if those don't match, it may be okay, but you may end up with compilation issues where the generated code is assuming certain versions of the npm dependencies or the NuGet dependencies, and if those aren't there on the right versions, then you're going to have some problems. So it just checks that now. It actually always used to check the NuGet versions, but it turns out there was a change in MS build at some point that caused that to stop working. So that now once again works.
Great.
There's some new error messages in when you're doing development, similar to the developer, the EF Core developer exception page middleware, whatever it's called, something like that.
Right.
That you can kind of get in if you're doing a traditional server-side Razor Pages or MVC style app. That'll show a big old HTML page that explains errors with your EF Core migrations. Similar to that, but in a much more compact and concise thing that just comes through your API calls as errors. It'll look for certain kinds of errors and say, hey, I think this might be because you haven't added a migration, for example, or you haven't run your migrations or things like that.
Yeah, that helps solve those little problems that you usually remember to do it and then you just forget, and why isn't this working? And yeah, just to help us find the things that bite us sometimes.
On the front end, the date picker component now has a time picker, a custom time picker associated with it, rather than kind of waiting for something to come along inside of Beautify that kind of fits our needs. We just went ahead and built our own to fill that need. So now the date picker experience is not defaulting to the native HTML date input anymore. It actually uses the kind of a full date picker experience.
Yeah, that's a lot nicer.
The admin pages now support bulk saves. This is defaults to kind of an automatic mode where it only uses explicit bulk saves when is necessary. So if you're creating a new object and that new object has required init only fields, then we don't know when you're done filling out those fields. And when you decide, okay, I'm done doing that, I want to create this, pass along those values that you're only able to set once ever. So now that will default to an explicit save button in those situations, and you can alter this by passing props to those pages in your view router. If you say, hey, I want my admin pages to always be explicit saves, you can actually do that now.
Oh, nice. Fantastic.
The generated data source classes are now always wrapped in a reactive, so you don't have to remember to wrap those when you instantiate them and you want to bind to them in your components. You don't have to remember to wrap those in reactive to get those bindings to work. It just does that automatically, similar to how the view models and list view models work.
Yeah, that's nice.
Going down almost to the very bottom, we added a new method to the view models called bulk save preview. This allows you to get similar to how there's a has error and an is dirty on an individual view model that are useful when you're using single saves. You can now get that same information for a bulk save operation to get whether there's any errors for any of the models that will be saved by the bulk save, or if there's any models that will be saved. In the case of the is dirty flag. So that allows you to create more rich UIs around that when you're using the bulk saves to maybe disable the save button or show summary validation messages, whatever you may want to do in your custom UI.
Nice.
You can do it using that.
Cool.
Yeah, and then we fixed a bunch of stuff. Nothing too special in there.
Okay. And if you're wondering about any of these items, you can always just go look at the links to the issues. So you'll see the issue links here if you have questions, and feel free to reach out if you do find an issue. We're reading those things, and mostly Andrew's looking at them and trying to get things and find those. We've actually had several folks get back to us with some things, and we're either adding new features or if you find a little bug or something like that, we're trying to get those taken care of as quickly as possible. So anything else, Andrew, on the new features aside from the templates, which we want to spend a couple minutes talking about? Are we ready to go there now?
Yeah, let's jump over to the template.
Great, awesome. So if we just go to the main page, the way you can find the template. So the template used to be something you just kind of got what you got, but now it's better than that, and you have some options. And what we were finding is that we built a lot of Coalesce projects here at Intelitech, and so we're finding that different folks need different things from those projects, and so we wanted some options to be able to go set those. And we've actually found it really helpful, even if you have an existing project, to go in, generate out a template project, and even go in and kind of retrofit your project, or if it's easy to take the stuff and just move it into the new project. Those are decent ways to go about kind of looking at, hey, what's the latest and greatest, and how can I get to that? So if you click on the documentation here, click on Get Started. We now have this whole new thing. You have the environment set up. This is all the things you need to get installed for it to work. But then right here, there's this whole new area. Andrew, talk to us a little bit about how this works.
Yeah, so the template now has a number of optional features in it. We select some of them by default here, but others we don't. So rather than write out a big documentation page of here's how to add ASP.NET Core identity into a Coalesce project, which is a pretty involved process with a number of steps. And
Yep.
You know, and really it's dependent on the different, you know, what kind of provider you're looking to sign in with. If you're wanting to do local accounts, which we don't yet have in the template, but will be coming. Or if you want to do an external sign-in with Microsoft or Google or whatever other external provider. It turns out that's, you know, generally a pretty complicated, involved process. So rather than try and document every step that you need to do there, we just went ahead and said, okay, well, just, hey, here it is. You know, it's really not fun to go through the exercise of having to do that. You know, it's not really something that you want to do and want to follow along with some documentation. Hope you don't miss a step.
Yeah.
So we just said, hey, here you go. You know, here it is.
Yeah. And
And
the
Grant,
nice.
scroll down a little while you kind of click those.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, you see
yeah.
this. So you're seeing all these things. Now, one thing that I would kind of recommend doing is that if you have a project that has certain things in it, just go ahead and generate out for that project and generate a template for that. Then go in and say, I want all this other stuff. Generate the project again, and you can then diff the projects to see what actually changed. So you can see all the pieces. So hey, if I want to add ASP.NET Core Identity, generate one without, and then you can check it in, generate over the top another one that has it, and now you can diff those things and see, oh, hey, this is all the stuff that Coalesce adds in for you for the, in this case, Core Identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then if you're feeling really brave, you can then take that diff and export that as a patch, and then apply that patch to your project.
Oh man,
it probably it's probably not. I mean, it depends. It depends on how much your project is diverged. It might kind of work.
Be okay.
It'll get you a little bit of the way there, but you're probably gonna have some merge conflicts.
Right. But at least it's going to give you a really good idea of, hey, here are all the things, and really what we consider best practice with respect to implementing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about some of these other ones. These look cool.
Yeah. So you know, adding pictures to users. So if you're doing sign-ins with an external provider, we can just grab the picture out of there. That's just kind of a bit of tedious, busy work to get that working, and it's something that's you probably want for your project because it's a nice thing to have. But you know, a lot of times it just doesn't get built into projects because it's just, again, a bit of, you know, just work that maybe isn't going to get prioritized on a particular project. So if that comes out of the box on a template, then you already have it, and you know, that's a pretty good win for a project. Other things here, like a tracking-based class, you know, that's pretty easy to add. Something that a lot of projects want to have is just a, you know, created by, created date, modified by a modified date on every entity. If that's relevant to your project, if it's something you're interested in having, then just build that out for you and put in a little bit of code to make that work. You know, audit logging, you know, we have the whole audit logging feature in Coalesce, so you can just include that out of the box, and it'll set up the infrastructure, set up the, you know, the, yeah, all the infrastructure for doing that.
Nice. The next one was a little bit. This one was a little bit contentious. The dark mode toggle, because we were just considering just having only dark mode, but I think we probably should have named it the light mode toggle. Although I am using this in light mode right now, I guess I should probably toggle this over to dark mode. But anyway.
Yeah, that one's fairly self-explanatory, but there's a number of pieces, you know, around the ability to toggle between dark and light mode that a lot of applications get wrong. For example, not defaulting to the browser preferences.
Yeah.
Something a lot of applications do. So if you have your browser in a dark mode theme, or you have Windows in dark mode, or you're on a mobile device, if you have your mobile operating system set to prefer dark mode, a lot of applications don't respect that and won't default to that, even if they do support a dark mode feature. So we set up the infrastructure for doing that. We also make sure that when the application is loading for the first time and you're just loading that index HTML page before it's actually started to load your scripts that actually load up the real part of your application, that you're not blinded with a flash of white. If you're preferring dark mode.
Yep.
So, you know, while the dark mode toggle is a pretty simple thing, hey, switch, you know, take the Beautify theme settings and switch it between dark and light. There's a number of things that come along with that make it a really nice user experience that are,
That's cool.
again, just a tedious thing to build, but if we can provide that out of the box, then you don't have to build them.
Right.
Sample page is just a basic model. I'm actually considering just removing this in the case of a project with identity, because we're going to have pages around managing the user, which act as a pretty good sample to start with. So, you know, as a thing that you really just have to go and delete, it can be useful if you're starting for a brand new project for the first time, and you're not really familiar, but we're actually adding some new things in an upcoming version that may actually make this pretty much obsolete. So that may go away. Open API. So if you want to include a Swagger API page that will allow you to expose an open API document that consumers could then, you know, generate out clients for other uses, you can do that. It's kind of not really not a super well-worn path in a Coalesce. It's fairly atypical to do that, but the Swagger page, at least in development, can be pretty useful if you just want to test out an API without needing to build a page around it to do that.
Yep.
App Insights, if you want to use Azure App Insights for application logging and diagnostics, again, that's generally a pretty simple thing to add into your project at a kind of a base level, but if you want to kind of get all the pieces tied together and working nice, especially in a spa situation, you know, get App Insights running on the front end. There's a few extra pieces to make that work kind of really nicely. So
yeah, right.
Those are included.
Nice.
And then finally, a template for a build process in Azure Pipelines. We are also working actively on one for GitHub Actions as well.
Yeah, and it's probably fairly straightforward just to convert one to the other if you do need to, but we'll go ahead and throw in GitHub as well. And then we could put something here. Get that all right?
Yep. So generally, you know, standard .NET namespace conventions, company name, project name, or whatever kind of root namespace you're looking for, and then the .web and .data will be appended to that in the generated result of the template.
Nice.
So from there, you can just hit copy and open up your favorite terminal and just paste the whole thing in.
And away you go. And this is, am I doing this from, I'm doing it from like my root, whatever my root folder is. So if I have like wherever I do my source control, I'm going to run it from there and it's going to create a folder for me, right?
Yep. Yeah. So you can see that in a little bit of text
here.
just above the button.
There we go.
We provide that. So execute it in your folder with all your other projects. You don't need to make a root folder for this project. It'll make one for you.
It just puts it all inside there. It doesn't really do anything in the current directory aside from make that one folder.
Yep.
So great. And coming up, we're actually working on a couple of other things. We're hoping to maybe even add some things like tenancy and some stuff like that to this, because I know there's a lot of people that are using this for use cases like that. And tenancy is one of those things that is notoriously hard to implement. And so we're going to try to give some kind of out of the box support for that. We're hoping we're working on that right now. We've had a lot of discussions about how exactly that should be done. It's not going to cover all the use cases, but there's going to be hopefully a fair number of them that allow you to kind of cover the main ones that we've used. And again, we've used this in many different cases, and we have a lot of different models like this that do use tenancy. So we're trying to kind of gather the ones that make the most sense for kind of the general public. So.
Yep.
Anyway, Andrew, anything else that we want to do before we sign off on this one?
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, I think we got it pretty much all covered.
That's awesome. And basically what this means is that a bunch of those things that Meg and I have done in the past are now kind of obsolete, which is great.
Well, not obsolete, but kind of done automatically.
Right. Right. So you hopefully you won't have to go build Swagger in. You won't have to go and build the audit logging in. And as we develop new pieces, we'll just try to add some of that stuff to those templates to make it easy. So Anyway, Andrew, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all the work that you put in, as well as the team going here into Coalesce 5. We're excited to start building more apps with Coalesce. So until then, keep on building cool stuff, and we'll see you later.
Thanks all.